Many thanks for joining us. This is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. I am Bisi Adebayo. Coming up, Nigeria's headline inflation rate continues its downward trend, eases to 15.98% in September, and the International Monetary Fund raises concern over the impact of Kenya's political issues on the country's economy. Plus, Zimbabwe bans imports of fruit and vegetables to preserve scarce foreign exchange. Well, Nigeria's headline inflation rate continues its downward trend, declining to 15.98% in September from 16.01% in August. This is the 8th consecutive decline in inflation since January 2017. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics released today shows that food inflation rose to 20.32% from 20.25% in August. This was driven by notable increases in bread and cereal, meat, vegetables and other food items. Core inflation eased at a slower pace in September, rising by 12.1% against 12.3% in August. Now let's hit the markets now, beginning from Africa, where all the indices are bleeding at intraday. Nigeria's all-share index is down 0.44%, while the South African Bourse has also lost 0.45% at intraday. Egypt's index is down 0.35%. The Kenyan Bourse closed 0.46% lower on Monday. And it's a similar story in the Middle East, as most of the markets were lower at intraday except the Saudi index, with the banking and insurance sectors holding up after their rebound the previous day. Dubai's index edged down 0.39% as Emma Properties fell 0.6%. Abu Dhabi lost 0.77% as Dana Gas fell a further 1.3%. It's been sliding since a London court adjourned hearings last week on its attempt to avoid redeeming $700 million of maturing sukuk. Qatar's index lost 0.07% as Qatar National Bank fell 0.7%, ending a 5-day winning streak after it reported solid third-quarter earnings last week. Now let's cross over to Europe, where the markets were slightly lower this morning as investors monitored the latest political developments in the Eurozone and reacted to earnings updates. The UK September inflation data is also on tap at the markets. Well, for more on the European markets, let's talk to Conrad Busin, who is at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. It's good to see you again, Conrad. So, European aviation giant Airbus has acquired a majority stake in Bombardier's ailing C-Series passenger jet business. And that's a move that possibly allows Bombardier to bypass tough tariffs imposed by the U.S. government. But the question is this likely to annoy U.S. President Donald Trump?
Well, in this context, it's important to know that the plan of Airbus and Bombardier is to build those planes now in a factory in the U.S. state of Alabama, which is run by Airbus so far. So in the future, it's not going to be as easy for Donald Trump to, bash foreign companies from Europe and from Canada. If he ever intended to do so, to be fair, I have to say that it was Trump's Secretary of Commerce who imposed those punitive tariffs on the import of those C-Series planes by Bombardier, which are produced in Canada and in Northern Ireland. And also I have to say that the Commerce Department indicated that the tariffs will remain in place also on the parts which are now going to be imported into Alabama from Canada and from Northern Ireland, and which are going to be assembled in this Airbus factory. And, this really indicates that this is not only about a potential attempt to bypass those tariffs. This is really an important partnership of two plane makers that are going to benefit both from the situation. Bombardier will get a lot of money, it will get resources, it will get a strong partner in this political fight with the Americans, and a strong partner when it comes to developing and selling its airplane, the C-Series jet. And Airbus will get a jet in its portfolio that it doesn't have yet, a jet of this size. And this airplane, the C-Series, is really a very technologically advanced. And that's why this is really a win-win situation for them. The shares in Airbus today are up 3% here in Frankfurt, and Bombardier's shares are traded 8% higher than yesterday.
Now let's take a look at the UK's latest consumer price inflation data, which shows an annual increase of 3%. How are investors reacting where you are, and what's the Bank of England likely to say about this?
Well, people here are very closely looking at the pound-sterling exchange rate, especially as Mark Carney, the chief of the Bank of England, also spoke today in London. He gave a lot of answers to questions of members of Parliament of the United Kingdom. And there he said that it was likely that the inflation in the United Kingdom was about to rise even above this 3% level reported today, which makes it also quite likely that Mark Carney will soon have to write a letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister of the United Kingdom, Philip Hammond, explaining why the Bank of England so far has not managed to meet the 2% consumer price inflation target. Excuse me. And so Carney is concerned about inflation. He didn't say exactly when we can expect higher interest rates in the UK. That means that the scenario which is in place so far remains intact. Markets are getting prepared for the increase of interest rates in the UK by the end of this year. This is what Carney had indicated a couple of weeks ago at the end of September.
Now, just before I let you go, Conrad, tell us what corporate earnings are moving the markets today.
Lots of corporate earnings are moving the markets. Some of them are outstanding. Goldman Sachs, for example, earnings per share came in to be $5.02. That's 85 US cents above what analysts had forecast. Also, revenue or or sales at Goldman Sachs are much higher than what analysts had anticipated. 8.33 billion US dollars. That's about 790 million more. Remember how we talked about that Goldman Sachs was in trouble during the second quarter, had disappointed with its earnings then, but this beating of analyst expectations in the third quarter really indicates that there has been happened some turnaround there at Goldman Sachs. Netflix is interesting also. The streaming service also managed to beat analyst expectations quite significantly with its earnings. It also managed to get more subscriptions, more subscribers. The increase there was above what analysts have forecast. And let me tell you, even the not so good earnings reports, like the one of Johnson & Johnson, which reported about a 12% decline in earnings, that was better than what analysts had expected, and that's why also those shares are on the upside. It's a positive day here on the stock markets today.
And it's good. We'll stay positive. We'll hope we'll stay positive for the rest of the week. Well, many thanks, Conrad Wilson, for this update, and see you again tomorrow.